champion.
What's he saying?
Is that English?
These videos are satiric reviews. You don't have to agree, but don't bitch about it. I hate this channel.
Hey there, I'm the SIJW V Infuso. And during the 90s, the then WWF's massive mid-card had the opportunity to compete either for the Intercontinental Championship or the European Championship. Pretty prestigious prizes in their own right. Okay, maybe one was a little bit more prestigious than the other. I mean, I'm not gonna drop any names, but...
Marsha!
But that's neither here nor there, with the roster being the size that it was. And seriously, take a look at the cover of this Attitude Era DVD. And that's with some exceptions. We're talking about a massive mid-card. And a pretty big main event scene as well. Anyway, despite the roster being so large in number and grand in talent, the two belts surprisingly had a fair amount of crossover. And we're not just talking about a superstar winning both belts. We're talking about the superstars winning and holding the belts simultaneously. First and foremost, I'd like to give an honorable mention to the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, who after dethroning the belt's inaugural champion, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, he'd go on to beat Bulldog's brother-in-law, Bret the Hitman Hart, and I'm using the word beat very loosely here. He would go on to beat Bret Hart for his WWF Championship, making Shawn Michaels a dual champion, and further solidifying the European Championship as one of the B belts of the company, because he basically didn't defend it and didn't really care for it.
Shawn Michaels, you have not defended your European title in 30 days.
In case you haven't noticed, chump change, I'm the World Wrestling Federation champion, and don't you forget it.
As a matter of fact, he literally just gave the belt over to Triple H. That was it. That's how you lose a title. So while Shawn may not have been a Eurocontinental champion, he was still a dual belt holder and probably the most memorable one, so I felt that he deserved some kind of honorable mention here. The first ever ICE champion was one of my personal favorites as a kid, and a major staple in my boys' stable. We're talking about none other than the real deal, D'Lo Brown. He would beat Mideon, who funnily enough, like Triple H, didn't actually win the title over, but instead just found it in Shane McMahon's bag and asked him if he could be champion. Because that's how you get a guy over.
I have absolutely nothing else to prove. I am undefeated and I have an unblemished record. I am officially retiring the World Wrestling Federation's European Championship. It is no more.
Several months later.
I was in your bag over there ready to go, and I saw you had an extra belt, and I lost mine. Mind if I have it?
Are you not? Do whatever you're gonna do.
D'Lo Brown beat Mideon, who was thankfully clothed at the time. You know, sometimes he ran around just with that fanny pack. You know, I'm glad he wasn't doing that. For the European Championship at the 1999 event, Fully Loaded. This was an accomplishment in of itself because the win would make the real deal a 3-time European champion. He'd follow that victory up with a second title victory over new Intercontinental champion, Jeff Jarrett, in a title-for-title match. However, after only a month into his title reign, D'Lo would lose both belts in a rematch to the former champion, thus making JEFF, JARR, ETT, the second ever ICE champion. Of course, the Chosen One didn't do this on his own. I mean, how could he? Let's be serious here. I like Jeff Jarrett probably a lot more than the next guy.
Jeff Jarrett isn't in my top 5, but easily has a place somewhere in my top 20.
But this is D'Lo Brown we're talking about. I mean, he brought it, so what was Jeff Jarrett gonna do about it? No one's gonna get that. No one's gonna get that reference. It's a waste. Jeff enlisted the help of D'Lo's tag team partner and best friend, future sexual chocolate, Mark Henry. I guess he's probably better known for his dominant run with the Hall of Pain, but not for me. No. He's always going to be sexual chocolate.
It's sexual, baby.
The next night, as a token of his appreciation, Jeff Jarrett bestowed his European Championship to the world's strongest man.
Tonight, consider yourself the new WWF European Champion. D'Lo got screwed last night, and tonight, Mark Henry gets...
And wow, I'm just starting to notice a trend here. People just giving away the European Championship. The hardcore title was fought over more than this belt, and that one literally looked like somebody dug it out of a dumpster. You know, I'm starting to realize why that title isn't around anymore. People just, they wanted nothing to do with it. D'Lo would then focus his energy on his Nation of Domination stablemate, eventually winning the European Championship off of him once again, in his last reign with the belt. Funnily enough, D'Lo would go on to lose that same title to the belt's debut champion, the British Bulldog. Bulldog shortly after would lose that championship to Val Venus, who would lose the title to your Olympic hero, Kurt Angle. Angle would win the match, celebrate like he just won a Super Bowl, and clock out for the night. And just 2.5 weeks later, Angle would win the Intercontinental Championship off of the Millennium Man, Chris Jericho. And just, it makes so much sense why they would do this, because anything that Kurt touched turned to gold around this time. Don't believe me? See those medals he has around his neck? They used to be made out of chocolate.
He's got the Midas touch, but he touched it too much.
Kurt Angle was at his prime both as a performer and as an entertainer, and his time with both belts is infinitely more memorable than any who has come before him, and certainly more than who came after him. I'm not throwing shade. Let's just say the European champions, the title had seen better days. This was the perfect time for such a push, as Angle was still establishing himself as the pro wrestler / sports entertainer he'd forever be remembered as. If you haven't lived through this time period, I highly suggest going back and checking it out. It's well worth the watch. In an interesting turn of events, it was decided by Kurt Angle's manager, Bob Backlund of all people. Yeah, remember that pairing? It's okay if you don't. It was decided that Kurt Angle, your Eurocontinental champion, would put both titles on the line in a triple threat match that year at WrestleMania 16, better known as WrestleMania 2000. Yeah, good luck solving that problem in the future, Steph and Hunter's great-great-grandchildren.
The math doesn't add up.
Angle would put his belts on the line against the crippler Chris Benoit and Y2J Chris Jericho, in a unique matchup that would hold 2 pinfalls. The first pinfall in that match would be for the Intercontinental Championship, and the second pinfall would be for the European title. Chris Benoit would get the first fall, pinning Chris Jericho, thus becoming Intercontinental Champion. I'm already tired of saying Intercontinental, it's too many times, there's too much going on. I don't like the word, I don't care for it. And Chris Jericho would get the second fall, pinning Chris Benoit, thus becoming the European Champion. Therefore meaning that Kurt Angle would lose both his championships without ever even getting pinned or submitting. And that is good booking. And yeah, I know I make a lot of sarcastic comments on this show, but this actually isn't one of those times. This is legitimately good booking. You have a triple threat match, you get both titles off of Angle, crown 2 new champions, and it doesn't take anything away from the former champion's credibility. I love it. This is perfect. This was intelligent, and for me, this match was a highlight of the show. I mean, sure, yeah, everyone else chose to instead remember the death-defying spot fest of the triple threat TLC tag team title match that went on earlier in the show, and rightfully so. Unforgettable moment. But this was every bit as good. And I honestly even think that this triple threat might rival WrestleMania 20's main event. Unfortunately, both are kinda lost to time due to the presence of one man, who will remain anonymous. Stevie Richards.
That's 2, a trifecta at WrestleMania with the bridge. It's over. Oh, call him Dim White. Look at, Angle got one of the title belts. Intelligence time. And Angle just. Angle misses a clothesline. And for Chris Benoit. Going, Jericho.
Chris Jericho!
And Kurt Angle's shoulders were never to say the very least. Qualification, the biggest title match in the...
Finally, our last entry, and you know what, I don't care if you say I'm wrong, because deep down, you know I'm right. The last man to hold both the European Championship and the Intercontinental Championship was a guy by the name of Rob Van Dam. At some point down the line, it was decided that one of these 2 iconic belts had reached its expiration date.
That nigga is dead! D-U-D! You are
dead! Dead! You are dead!
As the company was busy trying to incorporate newer titles such as the World Heavyweight Championship and the United States Championship. It was decided that the Intercontinental Champion, Rob Van Dam, would take on the European Champion, Jeff Hardy, in a match in which the winner would remain champion, and the opponent's championship would disappear. Van Dam would win that match, thus allowing him to keep the IC title and assuring that there would be no more European, let alone Eurocontinental, champions in WWE history. And while certain WWE archives don't list or acknowledge him as champion and the last holder of the belt, I think it's safe to say they're wrong.
Wrong!
The match was essentially a title for title match, with one title being retired following it. Both titles were up for grabs. It doesn't matter how long he grabbed it, his hands were on that belt, thus making RVD, in those very few moments of time, the final Eurocontinental Champion. How's that for history?
Well, let me tell you something, brother. You're watching the Social Injustice Warrior V Infuso's channel, dude. So if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too want to become a V-tard, don't forget to like and subscribe, and click that little bell icon to get updates and notifications. Ooh, tell him what up, Mach. Ooh, yeah. Follow the man on Twitter, yeah, because we all know it's not stalking if it's on the internet, yeah. Join the madness by joining the Discord, and if you have a moment of time and a free $1 to spare, head over to the SIJW's Patreon, dig it, where you can request videos, get exclusive videos, and early access to content, yeah. Or go down to PayPal, where you can buy the shirts, brother. But most importantly, just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.